there, Diane Hollett from NL Marine Organics. I didn't always work with marine byproducts, but as a child of Newfoundland, you certainly saw things that kind of was formative. For me, I think it was that time being a child out on Salvage. Our family's from Bonavista Bay, and that's where we hang out in the summertime. And watching them dump the loads of male capelin. And I was a child, maybe 7 or 8 years old. And of course, that hasn't happened. That doesn't happen generally now because protein, of course, isn't such demand. But at the time, that was formative, seeing that much fish go. So of course, when I had an opportunity to do something about it, I jumped at the chance. So it's a liquids company, a liquids fertilizer company that processes and does extracts and biotechnology, sort of smaller scale and now more to scale up now is a challenge. So we do this bioprocessing of natural resources. We do some work with fish, of course, and the salmon farm byproduct. Other fish products can be dealt with. We do some work with seaweeds on a food level, though, and on a higher end level. And I'll get to that because we've got this whole innovation piece that we're involved in with Grenfell. So we'll talk about that again. Really, we talk about byproduct as being parts of the fish that people aren't eating or aren't eating now. And so that would be head, tail, guts, especially the guts. The guts are where all the good stuff is. So yeah, so that would be your byproduct. So we're going to start with one particular category of fish byproduct because it's regulated, there's resourcing there, and that's the aquaculture sector. So we're going to start off with a service model to the aquaculture sector where we're able to take their byproduct and process it into fertilizer in these large tanks and stirring the systems with very gentle low heat. And we let the enzymes kind of dissolve the flesh into amino acids, basically. It's the process. So for that, we're using the salmon. All of that oil is super, super good for the soil. And that's precisely what we're going after then is the morts. And if you think about it, with that many fish, there's a natural life cycle, and there is always some that will die. So those fish need to be removed, and then they are ensiled, which means they're chopped up and they're dosed with a simple little formic acid, and it reduces the pH, just like it would in your stomach when you digest food. And so that material is sort of turned into a slurry, and viruses and bacteria and toxins are neutralized. So it's a clean kind of tech way to start with that byproduct. Because, you know, we're in 2022, we can avail of modern technology and equipment. So this was an engineered solution that came out of the engineering and process engineering, chemical engineering. So the process engineering crowd designed a marvelous little system, and we expanded it took it from, you know, lab scale, bench scale, and then we did some larger size runs with full truckloads of fish. Because in this business, if you can't deal with a full truckload of fish at one time, you're nothing. You got to be able to deal with that. Because that's your logistics and your efficiency. You have to be able to move your process through. So we designed that, and it's fully enclosed, pumped. So it's a liquid, so it's fully enclosed, pumped, and kept in sealed tanks. So that's one of the ways that we manage the nature of the material. The other way is by keeping the pH low, so that sort of degradation of the flesh doesn't happen. Because in our case, this is not your old fish meal kind of plant where you're trying to destroy the proteins or cook it to death and, you know, use all this fossil fuel. It's a low-tech, gentle approach where we use enzymes in low temperature to gently process. It's a pickling process, and then the enzymes convert proteins into amino acids, and that process is called hydrolysis. So like if this was a molecule or like a protein chain, it would be chopped into tiny little bits. That makes it easier for the body or the plant or the soil to absorb. It's the same technology as the sports drink powders, except for a different category raw material. The process of breaking down the proteins and the nitrogen into sort of very small, tiny amino acid forms means it's immediately available to biology. And then that feeds and supports the biology. We're a little bit behind the scale in Newfoundland. There's been other places doing it for quite some time. They've built up a whole body of application rate data, of field trials, et cetera, et cetera. So ours, because our raw material is very similar to like this, aquaculture salmon from one plant is very similar to that from another plant. So we can have some reliability in in those experiences working in ours. And so since we've been at it, we've been doing our own trials up at Windy Heights Farm and in gardens and working at application rates. And what's interesting, what I find fantastic, is if you scale this up, you can really make impactful change in this province. When you have the opportunity to make something broadly available that can do a lot of good and take us forward in our goals. So in terms of carbon reduction, greening up the soil and creating more organic life absorbs more carbon, and it helps plants to grow faster. So we're sort of starting that shift from a petroleum-based society dependent upon chemical fertilizers and urea-based inputs into something that's more biologically based, where we're building up soil organic content and helping cool the earth, especially on a commercial scale, when we can offer this up to farms and help them learn how to use it. We have to innovate with the resources all around us. Not just us in Newfoundland, the globe has to adopt new ways of doing things: cleaner, smoother, better, faster, cheaper, easier, because we really need right now to address things like fertilizer prices and food insecurity. And when we take, with fertilizer prices going up because of this global conflict, and we are sitting on a resource that could be used, and it's like we could turn the tap on and suddenly there would be a tanker truck delivering local fertilizer to farms instead of everybody having to buy the imported stuff, which isn't as good for us anyway. So yeah, I do get excited, and I think we need to support agri-tech innovation. We need to look at regional strategies. We need to look at mastering that learning curve where we're dealing with management practices and how farmers and people can use the resources around us. So yeah.
Thank you very much, Diane. I'm sure there will be questions for you, and thank you very much for participating in our conference today.
Most welcome. Thanks for having me.
So my name is Ben Wiper. I'm founder and CEO of 3F Waste Recovery, and today I find myself in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, but sometimes you'll find me up in Roddington or Main Brook or Hawke's Bay. That's up on the Great Northern Peninsula of Newfoundland. That is, if you go as far west as you can go on the island and then go all the way up north, about 450 kilometers from the nearest McDonald's, you will find our northern operations there. The concept behind 3F is taking our natural resource byproducts, or waste as it's maybe more commonly referred to, and adding value to it by creating natural ingredients and products from it. And we're particularly focused on making high value natural ingredients from these wastes to create local supplies to enable the most innovative companies in Atlantic Canada and Canada as a whole to have a secure supply that let them do really innovative things in nutraceutical, cosmetic, and pharmaceutical spaces. Fish waste actually has a lot of value, and we're really focusing on the collagen stream with a very high value application that refines it. Collagen is one of the fundamental and most essential proteins in the human body. It's vital to our skin, bone, and joint health. What I try to usually think of it as, it's the scaffolding between our cells in the body that help give it strength and elasticity. And over time, the collagen in your body depletes and degrades. Sun, working out, and wind, and whatever else you might do to your body. And so getting a new source of it is quite beneficial for a lot of health and wellness applications. Mind you, there's a lot of other value applications from those streams. There's our compost product, which is scientifically formulated. We have 6 different formulations that utilize the byproduct streams, manure, sawdust, and fish waste and shell wastes. We formulated to hit target NPK values for kind of optimal growth of various species of plants and vegetables, fruits, things like that. We also make a line of pet treats that's growing from largely fisheries byproducts, but we are getting into, hopefully soon, wildlife byproducts. So what we're doing is really focusing just on the carcass alone, the bones that you kind of might leave out in the woods, or the butchers have to pay to dispose of. We're looking to do some really innovative things in those spaces as well in the pet treat area. Within the forestry stream, we're really putting a lot of effort into the woody biomass stream, focusing on biodiesel, wood vinegar, and biochar opportunities using reverse pyrolysis technologies. And on the agriculture stream, we're really focusing in on the lipid and ester streams with sheep, lanolin from sheep, and also tallow as an ingredient from animal bones, and suet, the offcuts and trimmings, gelatin from those products as well. However, when we think into pharmaceutical applications for collagen, it kind of moves beyond what I kind of politely refer to as kind of the vanity projects. We move into real change in the areas of standard of care and drug delivery. We're engaging with several US equipment manufacturers in the healthcare space and 3D printing companies that are working on more effective cancer radiation treatments that are involving a collagen-based textile used for 3D printing medical devices that are basically tailored to the individual's bone structure or whatever the ailment is, and then it communicates with an external receiver. So collagen has a lot of applications in biotextiles and 3D printing, and because unlike pig and cow, it is halal certifiable, it's kosher certifiable. It also doesn't have the risks of bodily rejection or kind of tag-along diseases like BSE or mad cow or whatever you might want to call it. I've met a lot of people who, if you looked at their bank account, they weren't wealthy, but if you looked at their life, they were. And those people, in my life anyways, found happiness in giving it away. After I graduated university, I taught English. I went through, 6 or 8 different Southeast Asian countries, saw a lot of things. I read a book by a futurist called Neil Stephenson, and the idea that stuck with me was just this very small section in it where they described the landfill of the future. It's a landfill where all the materials come in. It had processes in place to break down the materials that were received into it into their most useful atomic or molecular structures. They became the 3D printer ink grid that fed everybody's house. 3D printing technology is going to help take us to a post-scarcity world, and those printers need inks. We all came from that stuff, and we will all return from that stuff. Our parents ate the food that was the soil, that was the people, that was the animal, that were the animals, that were the trees, that were the offshoots, the offtakes of what we didn't use. Marine resources and agriculture are really key, and especially in northern climates, Arctic climates, especially relating to food security, because they're a very natural source of base or alkaline materials that help reduce the naturally podzolic soils in our areas that are often highly acidic. And if you can take free calcium carbonate or chalk out of these shells, you can help address that issue, and you can actually do it quite targeted by using it effectively in your formulations. No, it is not just simple backyard composting. The technologies behind it are really with respect to finding the natural balance of the ecosystem that you're in. What is it providing to you naturally that you can then apply science to, rather than forcing the scientific square into the round hole that might be your natural ecosystem? Because you keep your costs low. I mean, a lot of expenses, and COVID's taught us, is your supply chain, and moving materials around is very expensive. It's high with greenhouse gas emissions. And so you have to start developing technologies that are oriented towards the materials that are in your backyard. You have to work within the market economics, because the political will simply isn't there right now to do anything about it, in my opinion. What we hope to do is, really figure out, how do we now take these formulations that help specific crops grow better. Most vaguely, maybe they help, like a carrot, have more beta carotene, or maybe yields a little bit higher, something like that. How do we take those from a bulky, heavy format and concentrate it down into a very, very fine, low weight format? If you can load a sea container full of a concentrated powder that countries across the entire European Union, or across, say, India, or a subcontinent somewhere, that container load of greenhouse gas emissions and the food security that generates is a much different cost benefit analysis.
So you were recently in Iceland.
While I was in Iceland, I had a tremendous set of experiences, to be honest. First of all, there is a thriving middle class of young families and skilled, highly educated people, Icelanders and others, being attracted there, largely in part to their high quality of life. There are not too many rich people, and there's no homeless people. It's a different way of living. There are affluent people, well-to-do, but like if you've lived in a small community, people who hoard wealth are typically kind of shunned a bit by people in their community, especially if they don't give back or recognize that you need us too. Necessity to get along, I would call it. The minimum wage, although there's no law for minimum wage, works out to almost $24 an hour. So not a 15% HST, but it's 25% VAT. It's in all the prices. But what amazed me is when everyone's averaging $24 an hour, everyone's really happy and laid back, and they're out and they're at the shops and they're having coffee and they're eating the bread bowls and they're chatting with the tourists and making people want to come back and stay there and live there. And, so there's that kind of effect. In Iceland, with better utilization of resources, what you see on the ground, the biggest one is their geothermal, but they use that for everything. The coolest one, I have to admit, is in the bathroom. You can hang your towels over it. It's a radiator in each bathroom, but you can also hang your towels. But what the Icelanders have been able to do is lead the way on the 100% fish strategy. And sometime in the 80s, they brought together the fisheries, farming, and for agriculture sectors R&D under one umbrella in Iceland. And they agreed to break up their silos of power and structures. And they said, let's go on now. Instead, just like they're the only ones who put the bankers in jail. They did it differently. They decided to do it the right way for the people. And so they brought together the R&D under one umbrella, and they were just a force to be reckoned with. I mean, they took their sheep resource, their horse resource. I don't know any of the cash crops, to be honest, but they have one of the largest inland aquaculture industries. They have a very large greenhouse industry that they produce a lot of their own food in. And so this circular economy model, what they've demonstrated, I guess, at a high level, is it is a regional solution that must be supported by public policy and consensus of the people. And if you don't have that, you're not going to get anywhere.
How challenging has it been to go looking for financial support and investment? Is that an ongoing puzzle for you? How's it going?
It's been a bit of a mixed bag in terms of, I'd say, private support. When you're working on very disruptive things, people are not only skeptical, especially if they've never been done before, but you you have to prove yourself as well. So there's that just fact of the things. However, I have to acknowledge and thank the support and investment of our federal and provincial governments into these areas. What I think we've been very successful at through building a network and strong advisory team and executing with the funding we've been fortunate enough to get is, we are able to demonstrate that investments in clean technologies into our rural communities, into our outport communities, into the blue economy, they will provide the return that is promised. And the fact of the matter is that right now, a lot of these technologies are very high risk. And because of that, they aren't likely to happen without government support offsetting that risk.
Right.
And for me as a startup company, when I can go and demonstrate that over the last 18 months or so, we probably raised around $1 million in either loans or grants. We've put 20 people to work. We've kept 20 STEM students, recent graduates of Newfoundland and Labrador's universities and colleges on the island, working in their outport communities or their rural communities, because we hire everyone across the island and we have a virtual and flexible workforce as well. If we can all decide on some basics of the type of world we want to kind of live into, in the future and pass on to people important to us, we need to think local first at everything. We need to think byproduct first, seafood second, byproduct first, lumber second, byproduct first, fruit, veggies, meat second. If you adapt the entire manufacturing process towards how you handle the waste stream, you not only maximize the profit stream of it, but you create all that new wealth and those jobs in the communities where those resources are manufactured and originate from.
Hello, I'm Andrew Williams, and I'm the Operations Program Coordinator for Second Harvest in Newfoundland and Labrador. Second Harvest is Canada's largest food rescue organization, but we're also a global thought leader in perishable food recovery and redistribution. In 2019, Second Harvest, along with Value Chain Management International, published a report called The Avoidable Crisis of Food Waste. This report measured food volume using a standardized system across the whole food value chain and encompassed all food types from terrestrial and marine commodities to identify and validate loss factors based on primary data provided by industry. The report provides a whole chain analysis from primary production through to end of life, and the findings of the report are staggering. It concluded that 58% of all food produced in Canada is lost or wasted. That's 35.5 million metric tons every year. Of that, 11.2 million metric tons is perfectly safe, edible food that is sent to decompose in landfill. In the food value chain, the words loss and waste have distinct but interconnected meanings. Loss is the discarding of food that occurs from production through to processing. It includes edible foods that don't meet customer specifications or orders from customers being changed or canceled. Waste is the discarding of food during distribution and marketing to consumers through retail or food service and subsequently the home. Food waste also applies to food and beverages that are donated to food rescue organizations but end up being discarded. The loss or waste of some of these items is unavoidable, such as the byproducts that are thrown out like bones, husks, and the planned waste that happens when food is cooked and processed. Avoidable food loss and waste, however, includes things like the apples that reach the retail store but aren't purchased by consumers, or the milk that won't sell because it's too close to its best before date. This unexpected or unplanned food loss and waste is the greatest opportunity to rescue edible food. Because unavoidable food loss occurs in the production of foods and beverages, which can subsequently be lost or wasted, all types of losses and waste can be reduced to a degree. Not all food is rescuable, but there's no denying that good food is still finding its way to landfill. The reasons vary, but we have found, in general, food businesses are not comfortable making unsellable surplus available to the public because of perceived safety and liability concerns. No one wants to donate food only to have that food make someone sick. For this reason, Second Harvest has e-learning and informational resources available detailing safe food handling and storage requirements and the difference between best before dates and expiry dates, as well as clear donation and consumption timelines for items at or near their best before dates. Many people are unaware that expiry dates are federally regulated, but they apply only to foods with strict compositional and nutritional requirements, such as baby formula or prescribed liquid diets. Best before dates, however, are not regulated, and they do not necessarily reflect the quality or safety of the food. If proper food safety is maintained, some items can in fact be safely consumed up to weeks after their posted best before date. There is also provincial legislation in every Canadian province and territory that absolves any liability from organizations with a documented food safety program that donate food in good faith. So why is it important to rescue this food? And there are two main reasons: to help our communities and to help our environment. Food that is sent to decompose in landfill releases methane gas, which is 4 times more damaging to the atmosphere than CO2. In fact, every year, 56.5 million metric tons of CO2 equivalent emissions are created by food waste in Canada. And while that food is decomposing, many of our friends, family members, neighbors are going hungry. Second Harvest and Value Chain Management International published another report called Canada's Invisible Food Network in 2021. The report shone a light on the huge number of nonprofit community food service providers working to feed Canadians living with food insecurity. For every grocery store serving our communities, there are 4 food charities working to support our vulnerable populations. And these services have been pushed to their limits over the course of the COVID-19 pandemic. On average, food charities in Canada have seen an increase of 72% in demand for their life-saving programs and services. So what can we do about it? How can we help? Second Harvest has a dual mission of no waste, no hunger. And to help manifest that vision, we rolled out our Food Rescue app. It's free for businesses and nonprofits, and it's a powerful tool for finding homes for edible surplus food. By connecting businesses with nonprofits in their area, we aim to grow the food recovery network in the province. And this direct relationship between food businesses and community food service providers allows businesses to support the communities while doing better for our environment. Our app keeps track of food rescues by food category and determines the approximate value of donated items, the amount of equivalent meals provided, and the amount of greenhouse gases that were prevented from being emitted into our atmosphere. Since 2020, businesses in Newfoundland and Labrador have coordinated through our app to donate nearly 200,000 pounds of perfect, good, safe food to nonprofits all over our province. Now, while the app is only for edible surplus, there are many alternatives available to reduce our reliance on landfills. Food is being wasted, the environment is suffering, and our community members are going hungry. It is imperative that all of us, from farmers to manufacturers, from producers to distributors, from stores to homes, rethink how we view excess food and change our habits so that people can benefit and an environmental crisis can be avoided. Thank you.